Hoop Heads podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
We went down to a tournament in Georgia, and anybody who's listening to this that's ever been to a grassroots basketball AAU tournament, that is not the top 100 players, they're going to know exactly what I'm describing. This is like, 14 courts under one roof. It's an absolute zoo. There's whistles blowing everywhere. There's parents screaming at officials nonstop. Like every coach thinks they're coaching in the national championship game, and they're just, screaming their head off. And there's very little organization to anything that's going on at this tournament. And not because the tournament was poorly run, but just because of the nature of the AAU basketball scene. And the very first game, these guys that we were playing against, they clearly wanted to beat Jay Bilas in this AAU basketball game. This is going to be the highlight of their summer, and they were coaching their brains out and taking it out on the refs and everything, and yelling at their kids. And he leans over about halfway through the second half and says, "Are they all going to be like this?"
John Searby is a 1998 graduate of Milligan College, where he led the Buffaloes to 3 conference titles and an NAIA National Tournament appearance. Following graduation, Searby embarked on a 10-year collegiate coaching career with stops at Gardner-Webb, Tennessee Tech, Lincoln Christian University, and Auburn. John Searby is the co-owner of the Jay Bilas Skills Camp and serves as the camp director. In this role, John manages ongoing planning and administration of all camp locations, as well as the programming and day-to-day operations of the camp. Help us pump up our social followers by sharing and retweeting our Hoop Heads pod posts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. A 5-star rating and review on iTunes helps too. If you're a basketball influencer, please subscribe to the show and encourage others in your network to do the same. Jason and I appreciate your support of the Hoop Heads podcast. Take some notes and learn more about the Jay Bilas Skills Camp as you enjoy this episode with John Searby.
Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here with my co-host Jason Sunkel. And tonight we are pleased to welcome from the Jay Bilas Skills Camp, John Searby. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on and get a chance to talk to you a little bit about what you have going now with Jay, and also dig into a little bit of your background in terms of your basketball career and basketball coaching. So let's start out by going back, John, to when you were a kid and talk a little bit about how you got into the game, what made you fall in love with the game of basketball.
Well, I grew up in central Illinois in a small community and went to a small high school with 500 students, and probably like every kid growing up playing basketball in Illinois, I thought I was going to be the next greatest player in the Big Ten, and it didn't quite work out that way. I stopped growing at 6'4", but was still fortunate enough to have some opportunities to play at the college level, and I chose to play at Milligan College, an NAIA school in Johnson City, Tennessee, and really that choice to go a long ways from home, a choice to play at a non-NCAA school so that I could get some of my college paid for through basketball, and the choice to be on in a program that really cared about person and player development really kind of changed my trajectory from a basketball standpoint. I went to school wanting and thinking I was going to be a high school teacher and coach. My high school coach was a man that I looked up to an awful lot, guy by the name of Cal Hubbard at Normal U High. And I wanted to be just like him. I wanted to teach high school history. I wanted to coach high school basketball. And when I got to college, I started to really learn a lot more about the game. I learned, some of the intricacies of how offensive schemes are developed. I had a genius defensive-minded coach who, we broke down our opponent's offensive schemes, and we planned to stop them. And I never even really thought about the game that way. Even though we were a good high school program, we weren't very complex. Not many high school programs are. So I got to college and realized there was a whole bunch of basketball I didn't know anything about. And as a player, I learned. I had an injury during my freshman year, so got to sit and watch an awful lot, which actually was a good thing in the long run. And by the time I was a senior, we had been to two NAIA National Tournaments, had won 3 conference championships, and I had a chance to be a captain of the team 2 years in a row. And so I knew at that point basketball was where my career was going to be. And I coached high school basketball for 1 year, and then my college coach, a guy named Rick Scruggs, got the job at Gardner-Webb University, Division II school here in North Carolina, and had a spot as a graduate assistant for me. And I had by that point I had kind of raised my dreams, if you will, to I wanted to be a college coach. That's all I wanted to do all the time. And so I packed up everything I owned in a Honda Accord and drove the 15 hours from the high school I was teaching at in Illinois down here in North Carolina, and started my career at Division II Gardner-Webb. I progressed through the college ranks, and really my dream was to be a college coach at the highest level. And so I went from Gardner-Webb to Tennessee Tech University. While I was there, I worked for a guy named Jeff Lebo, who, if there's any North Carolina fans listening to this podcast, they definitely know that name, one of the great players of the late 80s at North Carolina for Dean Smith. When Jeff took the job at Chattanooga, I ended up back at a Division III school in Illinois, Lincoln Christian University, as a head coach. And then I really learned how little I knew about the game of basketball when I was the boss. And I learned that being a head coach wasn't quite as easy as I thought it was. I was 29 years old. I was a Division III head coach and assistant athletic director at a small school. And I tell people it was the hardest I've ever worked, and it was the most fun I ever had in basketball. Just unbelievable kids who loved the game. They were there to become teachers or businessmen or accountants or whatever else they wanted to be in life, but basketball was their escape, and that was really refreshing to be around kids like that. I was only at Lincoln for a short time, and Jeff Lebo ended up getting the head coaching job at Auburn, and called me up and said, "Hey, I know you got your own gig and you're probably enjoying that, but I could really use some help, and I'd like to have guys around me that I know and trust." And so I joined Jeff's staff at Auburn and was on his staff for the first 3 years that he was there before ultimately getting out of the game full time and into college athletics as an administrator. So, that was my coaching career, was that progression. And I think what people find when they've been coaches at the college level is it's really hard to get that out of your blood. But the business side of college basketball, gets tougher and tougher every year. The game doesn't change that much, but the how you do business in college ball has certainly changed a lot since I first got in it in 1999. So that's kind of my coaching background, and I'm not sure where else you want me to go with it from there, but that's the foundation of who I am kind of as a basketball guy.
Gotcha. So I want to jump back to you as a high school player, because one of the things I found interesting about your story is just how, a kid from Illinois in the northern part of the United States ends up in Tennessee, and then obviously you spend most of your coaching career in the South through the relationships that you built. So can you talk a little bit about just how you ended up in Tennessee and Milligan, and what your other options were. And I know you said that, you chose to go down to NAIA because you had an opportunity to get some of your school paid for, and obviously that played a factor in it. But how did a school in Tennessee find a kid in Illinois to recruit you down there?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I know you guys are in the Midwest and know this kind of fact of life in the Midwest. But for high school players in the Midwest, if you're not a Division I player, there's not many options between Division I and Division III and NCAA in the Midwest. In the Southeast, there's a ton of Division II schools, and but there's just not that same proliferation of those scholarship level Division II schools in the Midwest and out west. So for me, my choices were really my mom and dad and I were going to pay $35,000, $40,000 a year for me to go to a Division III school, because that was who was recruiting me in the Midwest, or I was going to look outside of the Midwest and see what other options were out there. And I actually had a church youth group leader who had played basketball at Milligan, 10 years earlier. And he said, I don't know what kind of school you're looking for, but, I had a great time at Milligan and would be happy to call the coach and see if he'd be interested in you at all. So it was just a friend connection. Ended up doing what a lot of guys and parents of guys my age at that time did, making a tape, putting a couple games on a tape, putting a little quick highlight tape together and sending that to the coach down there. And he watched it and called me and said, why don't you come down for a visit? So I did the normal campus visit and hung out with the basketball team and played hoops with them for the weekend. And I just fell in love with the campus. It was a small school. Milligan has about 2,000, 2,500 students at the time, and no football. Basketball was kind of the king there. And there were a bunch of Midwestern guys there. That was the other thing I found. The head coach was from Cincinnati, so he had recruited guys from Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, Kentucky. And so there were a lot of guys from really good basketball schools and good basketball states playing down there. And it didn't take me very long to realize that even though I was one of the best players on my high school team, even going to a small school that nobody had ever heard of, I wasn't going to be near the best player on my college team. I wasn't even the best freshman in my class. So that was a real wake-up call for me, going from a high school of 500 kids thinking I was the bee's knees, and I show up at a NAIA school and I didn't even sniff the floor my freshman year.
Yeah, I think you make a great point there. Can you talk a little bit about, because again, a lot of people that are out there listening are either high school coaches or parents of high school basketball players. Can you talk a little bit about the level of play in the NAIA? Because especially in in some parts of the country, people aren't as familiar with NAIA basketball. So could you talk a little bit about just the level of play there and how good the players were when you got there? You already described it to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say the biggest eye-opener for me was, and I think what people find both at the NAIA level and the NCAA Division III level, is there is a certain level of physicality that comes with college basketball, and it does not matter what level you're at. I coached in the SEC and I played at the NAIA level, and there is not that big of a difference in the physicality between the two levels. Now, I will say the players are, quite a bit more talented and quite a bit bigger at the SEC level. But when it comes to, you drive down the lane and try to take it in for a layup, you better be ready for contact at any level of college, because they're not calling any kind of touch in the lane at all. So for me, that was the biggest shift. I was 6'4", 205 when I graduated from high school, and I was a power forward in high school. And I got to college, and my coach, the first thing he said is, if you don't learn how to guard the three, you're never going to play. Because, we don't have 6'4", 205-pound foremen here. And I know you think, it's going to translate, but it's not. So by the end of my freshman year, I was 225, 230, and I was playing the three, and really had tried to learn a different position, especially defensively. That was a big transition for me. So to answer your question, I think parents and players both have to understand that the opportunity to play college basketball at any level is a huge privilege, and it is not something to be taken lightly. And I don't care who's recruiting you. The fact that someone has an interest in you being a part of their college basketball program is a huge compliment. And because it takes, a lot of commitment to play. And that's the other thing I would say to parents. Parents at camp ask me that all the time. What level do you think my son can play at? Like, there is such a fine line between NAIA Division III, Division II, and even low major Division I that it can take one or two games and the right people seeing you for you to go from one level to the next. And so, parents and players need to worry less about what level they're playing at and worry more about what's that experience going to be like. For me, I probably could have gone and walked on at a bigger school, at a Illinois State or at a Bradley or something. I was physically big enough to go, do that, but I would have never seen the floor, and that's not what I was interested in. Like I said, I wanted to be a coach, and I felt like if I wanted to be a coach, I need to be on the floor. I need to be understanding the game. I need to be able to explain my experiences to players when I was coaching. So I think players and parents need to think really hard about that. If you're choosing between two schools and you feel like, if I go to this one, maybe my friends are going to be impressed when I tell them about it, but I'm never going to have a chance to play, or it's going to be 3 years before I have any chance to even contribute. Or I can go to this school and maybe I'll have to answer the question, where's that? But I'm going to have a chance to play for at least 2 or 3 years and contribute and kind of grow into that. And that was my experience. I didn't play much at all as a freshman, had an injury, as I said, but by the time I was a sophomore, I was ready and I was developed, and I started almost every game for the last 3 years of my career.
Yeah, I think to your point there, that what I really liked about what you said was the fact that there's a very slim margin sometimes between guys who are at, maybe the low major Division I level, Division III, Division II, NAIA. I know, speaking from my own career, I had an opportunity to play Division I basketball at Kent State, but that was the only scholarship offer that I had. And I actually went down and visited Oglethorpe in Atlanta, which is an NAIA school. And then I had a bunch of Division IIIs here in Ohio that wanted me to come there. And it ended up being a great choice for me because, just like you, I came in, didn't play very much as a freshman, but worked at it, figured out what I needed to do in order to get myself on the floor. And I was able to start for 3 years, and turned out to be a great experience. But certainly, had I gone to the wrong Division I school or played for a different coach or just been in a different program, it might not have worked out, because I think in a lot of people's minds going into that recruiting process, I was a very borderline prospect simply because I wasn't super athletic. I had good size for a guard and that kind of thing, but just was not the most athletic guy. Certainly that I competed against day in and day out, those guys were much more athletic than me, and I just got by on hard work and getting after it every day. But there's a very fine line. I could have certainly gone to a Division III school and had a very good career and never looked back. But I was fortunate enough to be able to have a Division I experience. And again, to your point, you have to end up in a place that's right for you, and I think that's the key. If you could tell any message to any parent or high school coach that's trying to steer a kid in a certain direction, just make sure that the fit, both athletically, academically, socially, is the right fit for you as a kid.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The other piece of that, and I think people lose sight of this now a lot, is make a decision about the school. Coaches are going to come and go. I had 2 different coaches during my college career. Both of them were great. I loved playing for both of them. But think long and hard about where you want to go for your education and what you want that experience to be like from an academic and a non-academic standpoint. Because coaches are in a tough profession. It doesn't matter what college level they're at, they are under pressure to win. And if you happen to be in a cycle where the team's not doing so great and it's the second or third year of not doing so great, you might you'll have a brand new coach your senior year. Well, if you just made a choice based on the coach, you got to pull up stakes and go somewhere else. So, I understand at the highest level, coaches like, Coach K and Coach Calipari, they are a part of the pathway to the NBA, but that's such a small group of people who are going to do that. So I would say to every other college basketball player, make a choice about the school and make it the right fit for you, because those relationships with those coaches, those will develop. If you're good enough and you work hard enough, you'll find your way onto the floor. It doesn't matter who the coach is. Coaches want to win games. They're going to put the best team on the floor to help them win games. So it's not personal if they play, and it's not personal if they don't. So make sure everything else is going to, be a good fit before you, make a commitment to that school.
Are you sometimes surprised that the number of players that don't understand that point that you just made, in terms of work as hard as you can, figure out what your coach needs from you as a player, and then that's what gets you onto the floor because your coach wants to win games? I'm constantly amazed by players I see or hear that sometimes will complain about, I'm not getting a chance to play because this guy doesn't like me, or I'm not doing this, and you just forget that players just need to buckle down and sometimes just do what's being asked of them or what's needed from them. And I think if we could get that message across to players and also parents, I think we'd be doing them a great service.
Yeah. To answer your question, I am surprised, but I think we as coaches have to do a better job of educating parents and players about that. We have to be transparent with them about that. One of the things we do at camp when we start, we have all the parents kind of come in close enough to be able to hear. We talk about the fact that, you're here for 3 days. You're going to get evaluated based on what you do these 3 days. This should not measure you as a player for the rest of your life. So take it in the spirit that is being given. At the same time, understand that the group of men and women that are coaching you at this camp know a lot more about the game than you do. And someday you might know more than them, but right now they all know more than you do about the game, and they have something to teach you. And so the best player I ever had was actually at Lincoln Christian University, the Division III school, the most talented player I ever had. He had bounced around. He had been a Division I transfer. Unbelievable player, but I honestly did not like him that much as a person. But he did things for our program athletically and from a basketball standpoint that we found a way to get along, and we found a way to coexist, and we found a way to build a relationship because he wanted to play basketball so badly that he was willing to make sacrifices of himself and his personality for the good of the team. And I wanted to win so badly as a coach that I was willing to give him a little more latitude than maybe I would have, based on my like or dislike of him as a person. So players and parents need to remember that you don't have to be your coach's best friend. The coach doesn't have to like you. The coach wants to win games. If they're doing what they're hired to do, they've got two jobs, teach the game of basketball and win basketball games. And during this process, you'll grow as a human. But their goal, every coach's goal is to win games. Nobody starts a season and goes, as long as these, kids have fun, if we lose every game, that'll be great. I don't care if you're coaching Pee Wee basketball, you don't want to do that. So, very rarely is a coach so vindictive that he's going to just, I'm just going to sit that kid because I don't like him. And I've been through that. If it had been a popularity contest when I was at Lincoln, my best player would have never played because I didn't like him that much. But he really grew as a young man, and I grew as a person, to be honest with you, as a coach, to be able to I had to learn how to bring him along and make him a part of the team, and vice versa.
Two things from what you just said. One is, what was it about coaching? Because I can feel your passion for coaching. So what was it, or what is it about coaching that you loved? And then two, what made you, after you answer that question, what made you step away then from coaching at the point that you did in your career?
Well, what I loved, and I'm going to say what I love, because I don't coach for a living anymore, but I still feel like I am a coach. The camp allows me to be a basketball coach, but my day job, I'm a sales manager for an advertising company. And so I've got a team of 16 salespeople that I coach every day. And that's how I approach my day job. I tell people all the time, if it was waking up and getting excited about selling billboards, I'm not sure that'd do it for me. But I get up and I get excited about working with my team. And so I think once the coaching part's in your blood, that doesn't go away. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. So the part I love about coaching is really simple. It is helping individuals become a team, and it's helping individuals get more out of themselves than they thought possible. And when you do those two things, that's when you win. That's when you win basketball games. That's when you win, in sales, whatever you're doing. If you can get more out of individuals than they thought possible of themselves, and then you can get those individuals to work together as a team, that's a successful coaching job. I can answer the second question pretty directly, and it's part of the reason why I'm so hypersensitive to parents and players being understanding about this profession. After our third year at Auburn, it was real clear, and Jeff was told directly that he wasn't going to get a contract extension. And in college basketball, if you don't have 4 or 5 years in your contract, you might as well not be coaching, because you can't recruit kids. You can't, the word starts to get out that you're a short timer, and it's hard to get kids to come play for you. So when he told our staff that, I have huge respect for him to this day, that, he also told us, hey, I understand if you guys, need to go look for something else, I get it. I'm not going to hold you here to, go down with the ship, so to speak. And so I had a 1-year-old at the time, and, looked at my wife and said, maybe it's time to do something different. So was very fortunate to get an assistant athletic director job at Bradley University, back up near where I grew up. Basketball crazy school. They had just been to the Sweet 16 the year before, and a position opened up in their corporate sponsorship sales. So really was a great timing for me to step away from full-time coaching. And I joke that I didn't bounce a ball with a whistle around my neck until I came to Charlotte. Would have been 5 years later, and met Jay and kind of started back into it that way.
How hard was it not to have a basketball season that first year?
Oh, it was really hard. October 15th was probably the hardest day of my life that first year. This was when there was a real hard start on practice, and I snuck down and watched Bradley practice their first practice, and that was tough. My 4 favorite days of basketball season are the first day of practice, the first day after when Christmas break starts, because every college basketball player is a pro that day. The classes are over, they can focus on basketball 100% for a couple weeks. Third one is the day after the regular season ends, because everybody's got a fresh start, and then the last day of the season, which for 99% of every team, it doesn't end the way you want it to, but the culmination of a season with a group of guys, it was always really special. I always, no matter how things ended, which, you know, every team I was on always ended in loss. We never won a national championship. So it was always just a really special time to kind of close the season out with a team.
So that first year that you didn't coach, did you find yourself going to more games or watching more basketball because you now had the time, you didn't have to focus on that team that you were coaching?
I tell you what, I don't know if I went to more games, but I enjoyed them a heck of a lot more. I could actually sit and watch and enjoy what was going on without agonizing over mistakes that were being made. It was a pretty freeing feeling. I remember going home that first year I was at Bradley. We had Michigan State come in, and as you can imagine, if Michigan State shows up at Bradley, you're going to have 11,000 people going bananas there. And it was heart-wrenching. Bradley lost in the last minute to Michigan State. And I remember going home that night and calling John Schulman, who we coached together, and telling him about it. And he's like, yeah, but you know what? You get to sleep tonight because you're not going to be running through in your head all the stupid little things that could have happened that you would have beat Michigan State. And like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I fell right to sleep when I laid down.
It's kind of how we're feeling with the Cavs now, because we have to watch the Cavs play without like any LeBron, and we're not really worried about the basketball. I feel like I'm enjoying watching basketball way more this season than I have in the last 4 years.
Are they still playing? They're still playing basketball?
Barely.
Hey,
I don't know if you can call. I don't know if you can call what they're doing that. I think the plan is, or at least my plan is, we're just trying to play this season out so we can get Zion. That's the whole plan.
There you go. Well, that is a plan. If hopefully that works.
I mean, I don't know how lucky we could be. We've had like the ball bounce our ways 3 times or whatever. I'm not really positive about that, but whatever.
We'll take.
But to answer your question a little more seriously, I do remember, and this really was for the first 2 or 3 years that I was out. I enjoyed high school basketball a lot more. I had gotten so ingrained of watching high school basketball a certain way, just kind of locking in on the 2 or 3 best players on the court because I knew those were the guys that I was going to be recruiting, and not really appreciating the game. And when I wasn't recruiting anymore, I could go to a high school basketball game and just enjoy good high school basketball, which that was pretty fun. We had good high school basketball in Central Illinois, and especially in Peoria, there were some really good teams during that era. So it was fun to do that.
Yeah, I feel that way watching my own kids. I have a freshman daughter now who's playing, and I have a 7th grade son, and I've spent a lot of time as they've been growing up coaching them. And this year, for the first time, both of them are playing on their school team. My son, for the first time, this is my daughter's 3rd year playing, and I have so much fun just sitting in the stands quietly watching them play. And I'll still coach them a little bit in AAU and that kind of thing, but it's very, very refreshing. It's such a different experience when I'm coaching them. To your point, like you described with the Bradley Michigan State game, you play and you get all tied up in what could I have done differently, and I think about the game for 24 hours, 36 hours after, and start planning out the practices and this and that. And now they play and I'm sitting in the stands, and I hope they do well. I want them to win and play well, but if it doesn't work out, 5 minutes after the game, I give them a hug and tell them I loved watching them play, and I'm moving on. And it's just a totally different feeling than when you're immersed in it as a coach.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked to our coaches. Part of our programming at camp is specifically for coaches, and we do a coaches development program that is men and women who are early in their career, just kind of getting acclimated. And one of the things that we tell them early on in the week is just remember that none of these players are going to care as much as you do about these games. And so the fact that they play the game, they win or lose, they play good or play bad, and by the time they've got their sneakers off and are walking back to the dorm, it's over. They're joking around, they're texting their girlfriend, whatever it might be. Like, don't take that personal. that's part of being a coach, that the coach and the coaching staff always care more than the players. And that goes for every level. I remember when I was an assistant at Auburn, we went out to San Antonio, and Jeff had played for Popovich and the Spurs when Pop was early in his coaching career. So we went out and spent a little time with them. And, this is when they had their best teams. David Robinson, Tim Duncan was a young player. They had just picked up Parker, and they had Ginobili. And, these are pros among pros. We go to a game, they lose a close game. We get to go back into the locker room after the game, and we're walking through the locker room. The players are joking around, laughing, having a good time, talking to reporters, whatever. We get into the coach's conference room. It was like, somebody had shot their dog. I mean, it was like a morgue.
Awesome.
I mean,
That's awesome.
Popovich was yelling at the video guy to get these clips up. We're going to watch this stuff. He's giving everybody a hard time about who had this part of the scout and this stuff. And like, this is one of 82 regular season games. They end up staying up. We stayed in there with them. I mean, I think it was like 1 o'clock in the morning before we left the conference room. Players were long gone. The arena was empty long ago. So, coaches are always going to carry that stuff way more.
Did Pop have more than 3 words to say every single time? Because, whenever you watch his interviews in the game, it's like 2-word responses. I always find him funny.
Yeah, no, he's a little different behind when he's not in front of the camera. He's a little more animated, and it was pretty enjoyable. It was definitely one of the highlights of my coaching career to be able to sit in that room and watch them watch tape.
The life of a coach.
Yeah, PJ Clarlissimo was on their staff then. There must have been like 8,000 pounds of pasta on the table when we walked in there. They're all sitting around shoving pasta and drinking wine and watching tape. We're like, yeah, this is what an NBA coach does.
Maybe that's why that part of the scout wasn't very good. He was drinking too much wine.
Yeah, probably right. When he got to the end of the game scenarios, he was too deep into it.
Got a little tipsy.
Let's take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, Alan Stein Jr.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
All right, so let's jump forward, John, and talk about how you got connected to Jay Bilas, what that story is all about, and then we'll jump into what you guys are doing with the camp.
Yeah, absolutely. So 2011, I got transferred to Charlotte with the company I was working for and been here a few months. And a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, would you be interested in helping me with this AAU team I'm running?" Like, no, I don't want anything to do with that. I'm done coaching. I definitely don't want anything to do with AAU basketball. I've been there. I've seen that. I'm not getting in the middle of that. He kept bugging me. And finally, he goes, "Well, here's the thing. I got this dad. He wants to coach his son's team, but his work doesn't really allow for him to, be there all the time. And he wants somebody who kind of knows what they're doing." And I was like, "You got to be kidding me. I'm definitely not going to be coaching with some dad."
That sounds like a coaching death wish.
Yeah, no kidding. Like, I'm not going to be coaching with some dad who, now I'm going to get into how much time are we playing his kid, blah, blah, blah. And my friend's like, just have lunch with me and the dad and let's talk about it. I'm like, all right, you're my, Scott, I owe you one. Let's have lunch. So I show up at the restaurant and there's my buddy, and he's sitting across the booth from Jay Bilas. And I'm like, so this isn't just any dad. Scott. It might have been helpful. This process probably would have moved a little faster if you would have said it was Jay Bilas, not just some dad of some player. Jay, for people who have met him or seen him on TV, he's exactly what he comes across on TV. He's super humble. He's really funny. He's just a pleasure to be around, and we immediately hit it off. And as we got to talking, the basketball world is a small world, and realized how many connections we had in the world. Guys that I was friends with that he knew well. He had actually been Jeff's host on his campus visit to Duke when Jeff ended up choosing Carolina instead.
He didn't do a good enough job.
Couldn't close the deal. So we had a good laugh over that and talking Carolina Duke rivalry and stuff. And so long story short, Jay's son Anthony was a freshman at the time, and Jay had always wanted to coach his son, but obviously with his schedule in the spring and in particular, he had a hard time committing any time to that spring AAU season. And so he was really open about what he wanted to do. He's like, I just, want to get some of Anthony's buddies together from a couple different schools around town, figure out what this is all about. I just want to have the opportunity to coach him and be able to say that we shared that experience. And, but I need somebody who knows what they're doing in the spring to kind of take the lead in the spring, and then I'm happy to take the lead and take on a little more responsibility in the summer. So for 3 AAU seasons, we did that together. And the camp actually sprung out of the very first AAU tournament that we went to together. That first season, I think Jay was still even in the middle of the season, or he just got done with the Final Four or something. And we went down to a tournament in Georgia. And anybody who's listening to this that's ever been to a grassroots basketball AAU tournament, that is not the top 100 players, they're going to know exactly what I'm describing. This is like, 14 courts under one roof. It's an absolute zoo. There's whistles blowing everywhere. There's parents screaming at officials nonstop. Like every coach thinks they're coaching in the national championship game, and they're just, screaming their head off. And there's very little organization to anything that's going on at this tournament. And not because the tournament was poorly run, but just because of the nature of the AAU basketball scene. And the very first game, these guys that we were playing against, they clearly wanted to beat Jay Bilas in this AAU basketball game. This is going to be the highlight of their summer, and they were coaching their brains out and taking it out on the refs and everything, and yelling at their kids. And he leans over about halfway through the second half and says, "Are they all going to be like this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I hate to break it to you, but they probably are going to mostly be like this. This is a little different group of players than you're used to watching from your seat." So that night we're eating dinner, and he kept shaking his head like, "I didn't know it was like this. I didn't know, what it was going to be like." And kind of bemoaning the fact that there clearly hadn't been much teaching going on. There was very little coaching happening. Things that were being modeled by coaches and parents were not good. Talking back to officials, talking back to each other, that kind of stuff. And he looked at me and he's like, what are we going to do about this? And I said something to him that at the time I didn't really give a ton of thought to, honestly, but it clearly had an impact on him because he repeats it all the time. Anytime somebody wants to talk to him about camp, I hear him say this. And what I said to him is, Jay, I'm not sure we can fix the game of basketball. This thing has gotten to a level and grown so large that I'm not sure we can fix the whole thing. But what we can do is we can take this piece of the game here in Charlotte, North Carolina, and in the Southeast that we've been given an opportunity to touch, and we can do something about that. And we can do the best with the kids that we're given if we want to make a commitment to it. And that night we kind of on the back of a napkin wrote out some notes about what a basketball camp that the two of us wanted to be a part of would look like. And what we kept coming back to, and some of your listeners may be familiar with this, is there was a camp that started in the late 70s, early 80s called 5 Star. And it happened in Pennsylvania. And 5 Star was all about player improvement. And this is before the world of AAU basketball had really sprung up. But the model at 5 Star was the mornings were for individual skill development. The afternoons were for breakdown work. You worked on 2-on-2, 3-on-3, 4-on-4 situations. And the evenings were for games. And you were on a college campus, and you were staying in the dorms, and you were eating in the cafeteria, and you were experiencing what it was going to be like to be a college basketball player. The pace was like a college basketball experience. Obviously, the campus and being in that environment was mimicking that. The coaches were all college head coaches. I mean, this is where Jim Boeheim and Calipari and Knight and those guys, they were the speakers, they were the head coaches at 5 Star. And so every time we kept talking about ideas, we kept coming back to this 5 Star model and talking about, what 5 Star developed into over the years was really a whole community of coaches, of players, of teachers of the game. And, so that was the dream was, let's take this little corner of the game of basketball in Charlotte, North Carolina that we have responsibility for, and let's do the best we can to make it better. And this is the model we want to do. So the first summer we had camp was 2013, and we had 55 kids, and we ran it out of Jay's wife's checkbook, and we didn't have a website. We printed up some flyers and mailed them out to every high school in the state of North Carolina, and 55 kids showed up, and we thought it was like the greatest thing in the history of the world. But we were able to run the camp the way we wanted to. We intentionally made sure that it was outside of the evaluation period. We didn't want it to be an exposure camp or a showcase event. And from day one, we have been unapologetic about this is a skills camp. This is where you come to get better. You're going to get an evaluation, but that's not what this is about. This is about you getting better and improving your game. And if you do that, then your dream of being a college basketball player will come true. And we will talk to you about helping you understand and refine that dream to the right level. But this isn't about getting you to a certain level. And so we've been doing camp for 5 years. 2019 will be our 6th year. And we've been fortunate that it's grown. We've gotten a little more professional about our approach. We do have a website now. You can register online, all the modern conveniences that we expect. But we've sold out the last 3 years, but the mission has never changed. We want to take the little corner of the world of basketball that we've been given to take care of and try to make it better. And so that's what the camp's all about. And I'd love to give a little more detail about a couple of the specific programs if you guys have time.
Yeah, absolutely. I want you to talk a lot or talk some about the 2 other tracks you have, because obviously most of what you just talked about was from a player development standpoint. But I know there's 2 other things. You have a coach development track, and then you also have something that you've put together for parents. So can you talk about those 2? Because I think those are 2 things that, beyond the fact that what you guys are doing is unique from a player development standpoint, simply because, again, most of what's out there now, to your point, is an exposure type thing, or it's tournaments, or it's just kids playing. It's not the old-fashioned where we're actually teaching you the skills and teaching you how to play the game. So that's unique in and of itself. But then I think where you guys really stand out is with the coaching and the parenting tracks that you have. So if you talk about those, that'd be tremendous.
Yeah, absolutely. So from day one, we wanted to make sure that the head coaches of camp were experienced college head coaches. We want these kids to have a college level experience. We want it to be the pace of play, the physicality of play, the thinking level that's required at the college level, because we want kids to understand, like I was talking about at the very beginning, we want that learning curve to be as small as possible. There's no way they're going to show up on the first day and be shocked, because we will have taken them through the pace of the first 3 days of a college practice. And so day one, we hired experienced coaches. What we found out is that because we were an NCAA campus, we were not allowed to have Division I or Division II coaches work. So I kind of went back to my roots and went to a lot of the guys that I had grown up with in coaching who, by this time had become Division III head coaches. And we had pulled together a group of Division III head coaches to be our camp head coaches, and a couple of former Division I coaches that were out of the game have sprinkled in each year. But what we found is, one, they know how to run a practice and a drill because they're really good at it. They have small staffs themselves. They're used to taking charge. And two, they're really, really good teachers. Sometimes, and Jay says this every year, there's guys coaching at our camp that are better coaches than he sees in the ACC or the SEC or the Big Ten, because they have to be, because they don't get to pick the best 20 players in the country to be on their team. So they have to learn how to coach in a lot of different styles. So that was a kind of a first really intentional piece to the camp. And what flowed out of that was that if we really wanted to simulate the college experience, we needed every team to have a staff, not just a head coach. A lot of camps you go to, you'll have a head coach. You might have another guy helping him. But, one of the interesting things about the college level is you got so many eyes watching you. I mean, if you look on any college Division I bench, there's as many guys in suits as there are in jerseys. All those people are watching something and coaching a little piece of something. And so we wanted to try to simulate that. And so what we did in our third year, we started this coaches development program. And what we're after, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, is men and women who are in the early stages of their career, whether they're high school coaches that have been coaching high school for 3 or 4 years and still feel like they have a lot to learn, or maybe they're graduate assistants at the college level, or they're junior college assistants, or they've been a manager for four years at a big school and they dream about being a coach. Or maybe we've had a couple guys that are student athletes and they're about to graduate and they want to be a college coach and they don't really know what that's like. So the coaches development program was really designed to meet a very specific need of the camp, is that we wanted every head coach to have a staff and be able to simulate that for the players. And what we found is that those guys, those guys and gals, those young assistants, they were really hungry to learn as well. And so that first year, we kind of just off the cuff, every day at lunch and dinner, we'd all sit together at the same table in the cafeteria, and it would turn into like an impromptu clinic. So the second year, we said, well, what if we make this more formal? And so what that's developed into is the coaches development program now has 40 participants every year. So every team gets to have 4 assistant coaches, which on the court, that's unbelievable. I mean, you guys know the more coaches you have on the court for a drill, the better the drill is going to be, because you got more guys, jumping in and helping to correct. A player gets out of the drill, assistant can grab them and talk to them about, hey, maybe you should have given a little shot fake before you tried to put that on the floor or whatever. So there's, coaching can be going on all the time when you have a whole staff. So that was a really functional need and helped us. But in year 2 and now year 3, 4, and we're going into year 5 of the coaches development program, we really formalized that program. And so there is a curriculum that starts. They all come in a day before the campers. The first day is all run by USA Basketball. So Don Showalter, who is the national coach for the U16 team, and runs Snow Valley, for people who are familiar with that. Don comes in and spends most of the first day with our coaches development program guys, just talking to them about the basics of being a coach, and some programming that USA Basketball has put together that helps them get their USA Basketball Gold certification, which is quickly becoming, an expectation for high school coaches and even for college coaches. And then starting that first evening, the head coaches and the assistant coaches all get together, and we kind of game plan. They work together to get their drills put together and things like that. And then during the camp, every day at lunch and at dinner and in the evening, we have a little mini clinic for the coaches development guys and gals. And I'm intentionally saying gals because I've been really proud that we've had, for the coaches side, we've had several women each year come and be a part of this. And that's an area we really want to try to grow our camp, that I'll talk about a little bit later. But so they get these little mini clinics, and it might be something like how to design an individual workout. It might be something like how to recruit in an AAU environment. It might be something about how to create a team building activity off the court for your team. It might be talking about the importance of your own social media presence. It might be about motivation. It might be about leadership. It might be about, last year we had one session that was 10 out of bounds plays that are guaranteed to work. So here's, young guys and young gals that have never had to coach before, don't have any kind of, library of plays. And, over lunch, they get 10 great out of bounds plays. And so it's all a mix of X's and O's, off the court, on the court, leadership, that really our goal is to make those folks that go through coaches development program confident that they're ready to coach a team and coach on the court. And that group in the 4 years that we've done that program, we have 7 individuals out of that group so far that have full-time college assistant coaching jobs, and we have 2 full-time or 2 Division II head coaches that have come out of that program that have been able to, very quickly move up the ranks and become Division II head coaches. So really proud of what that program has done and the way it's developing. And so, that's been a big part of the camp success, is having those folks participate on the court and help improve the camp for the players. But it's also been a great success for us. And I think, Jay would agree with me. We both get almost as much satisfaction out of the coaches program now as we do the player program, just because, the whole idea of we got 100 players on the court, we can impact them and make the game better that way. But you think about how many players we can impact by teaching 40 coaches how to do things the right way, how to approach the game the right way, how to teach the game the right way. Our impact on the game is so much greater through those coaches than it is, just the 100 players every year that are at camp.
Yeah, that's completely a win-win situation. You guys get the benefit of having all those extra eyes and minds out there on the court working with the kids who are attending camp. And then conversely, those young coaches get an opportunity to learn from guys like Don Showalter, who we've been fortunate enough to have Coach Showalter on the podcast. And he's just an incredible human being and just a tremendous basketball mind. So to have him be able to impact those young coaches, all those people, boys, men and women that walk away from there, it's just, it's got to be unbelievable for them, the amount of knowledge that they're walking away from that experience with. To your point of the success that people have had who've gone through the program, I can only imagine the wealth of knowledge then when they go back to their high school or their college program, or wherever it is that they are, and they share that with the other members of their staff or people that they know. I can't even imagine how excited they are with what they've been able to learn when they go down there.
Yeah, and it's been really neat to see them build community. I mean, almost almost like what happened at 5-Star years ago. Those folks are now, a network of coaches. They're getting together. We're going to actually have our first formal get together at the Final Four this year, where anybody that comes to the Final Four, we're going to have a Bilas Camp, kind of a coaches alumni get together. So it's really started to develop into a neat community and something that they can be proud of being part of. And but I know we're kind of short on time, but I did want to answer your question about the parents track. So 2 years ago, we had some parents come to us, actually 3 years ago, and say, hey, you mind if I pick your brain about, the recruiting process? And we kept getting the same questions over and over. And so 2 years ago, again, kind of impromptu, we started doing some just parent sessions and saying, hey, Paul Biancardi from ESPN is going to be in the theater where we've got space. If you guys want to go up there, he'll answer questions about the recruiting process. And then Paul's in there for 3 hours answering questions from the parents. And
he didn't know what he signed up for. No,
and then Alan Stein did one, and we said, hey, Alan Stein's going to be up in the theater talking about, what to look for in a trainer and how to evaluate AAU programs, things like that. Again, 2 hours later, Alan's like, hey, I got to run. I got to get down the court and actually teach some players. So last year we tried to kind of mimic what we were doing with the coaches development program for the parents, because parents, especially if they're bringing their kids from out of town, they're going to hang around. And so, there's nothing more boring than watching basketball drills if you're a parent. So try to give them something to do, but also get something out of it. So now each day we have 2 sessions, a morning session and an afternoon session for parents. And we do a lot of the same things that we've been doing from that first year. Paul and some other guys will talk about the recruiting process. Alan and some other guys will talk about some of the off-court opportunities and what to look for in a trainer and skill development, things like that. We've brought in folks from the NCAA to talk about compliance and the clearinghouse and stuff like that. We had a panel of coaches last year of a Division I, II, and III head coach just talking about the different levels and what to expect if your son ends up at the different levels. And so that's something that if your son's enrolled in the camp, it's completely free of charge. If your son is not, if you have a son that either is not old enough to be at camp yet or timing didn't work out or something happened, we do offer the parent track as a separate track for parents. And we've had a few people do that in the past because of different circumstances. But that's something that we continue to grow and develop and build our programming. But it really kind of rounds out our approach. We really want to try to educate players, coaches, and parents, because that's how we're going to have the greatest impact on the game.
Yeah, it's such a unique setup that, when you and I talked prior to recording the podcast a couple weeks ago, I just thought that it's just something that's not out there anywhere else. You don't go to a camp where they're developing players, coaches, and parents all at the same time. And I think there's such a need for education for coaches and parents, especially at the lower youth and high school levels, in terms of just being able to understand how to navigate the landscape, especially because a lot of times high school coaches might get their first player that's of a level that they can be recruited, or a parent. A lot of times, obviously, if you have a player that's going to be recruited to college basketball, you don't get to go through that multiple times and kind of figure out the lay of the land and understand. So for you guys who have been through it with your coaching staff and the experts that you're able to bring in, to be able to provide that value to people is just, to me, it's just invaluable in terms of making the basketball landscape better for everybody. So I think it's something that if people are out there listening and you do have an opportunity to attend the Jay Bilas Skills Camp, I would highly recommend it. A lot of the people that are working there and have been a part of it, we've been fortunate enough to have on the podcast, and I can speak for everybody that we've had that's been associated with it. Has just been an outstanding individual that has nothing but love for the game of basketball and wanting to help develop young people, young players, young coaches. And so, John, I just think it's what you guys have going is tremendous.
I really appreciate that. I'm going to steal a line from Coach John Schulman, who I know you guys have had on the podcast, but I think it was probably the highest compliment that anybody's ever given us about the camp. And he said, and this was after last year or the year before, he said the whole focus of the whole operation is to try to improve the game, period. And that is a direct reflection of Jay's vision for the camp. Jay never made a dime off this camp. He's not doing it for notoriety. Certainly, we're not adding to his 1.9 million Twitter followers with a 100-person basketball camp in Charlotte. He's not doing it to, get accolades. He never mentions the camp, in his public platform that he has, because he's not looking for that. The only thing he cares about is improving the game and helping kids. And if you've been to other camps, you know that that's not always the case with the leader of the camp. A lot of times the leader of the camp will show up the first day, shake a few hands, take a couple pictures, come back at the end of the week, shake a few hands, take a couple pictures. That's not the way Jay rolls. He's there from 7 in the morning, bringing coffee for coaches and hanging out. He's on the court constantly. He's coaching, he's teaching, and he's still there at 11 o'clock at night at the coaches development program X&O session, jumping up and drawing up, into the clock play that he saw from Tom Izzo this year that he thought was amazing. And his commitment to being so present at the camp is what makes the camp great. And it's what makes all the rest of us work that much harder and look at it the same way. I mean, because he has those motives, we're able to pay our coaches better, which means we get even better coaches. We're able to bring in the best speakers because Jay pulls in favors from the best speakers in the country. We're able to have programming that is driven, through his lens, that he's been sitting, courtside at some of the best games in the country for a whole year, and he'll sit down, every year. I think I've got it all planned out, and he comes in, he's like, "Oh, here's my notebook of stuff. We need to make sure we get this stuff in there." Like, okay, how am I going to get 20 great plays from the 10 greatest coaches in college basketball all into camp in 3 days? But it's just it's really refreshing. And when John said that about it's the environment where there's no angle, nobody's trying to take advantage of any of these kids for anything other than helping them get better. That really meant a lot to me, and I think it shows Jay's commitment to the game.
Yeah, I think that epitomizes what the two of you have been able to build. And you think back to the humble beginnings of sketching out the camp on a napkin to where you guys are now. And I think it's a credit to what Jay's been able to accomplish and what you've been able to accomplish, that not only are you impacting players, but you're impacting coaches, you're impacting parents, and as a result, you're impacting the game of basketball, which you and I and Jason all love the game and want to see it grow and get better. And to me, that's really what it's all about. So before we get out of here, John, if you wouldn't mind sharing out your contact information, how people can get in touch with you, learn more about the Jay Bilas Skills Camp, and then if there's anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to share before we get out of here, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So all the information about camp is on the website, jaybilascamp.com. There's a section for players, for coaches, for parents on there. There are a lot of links through there where you can click for more information, and that'll usually that's an email link that'll come to me. My email is jsearby, SEARBY @jaybilascamp.com. That's the best way to reach me is through an email to the camp email address. And I'm usually pretty good at getting back to folks with questions. The question I get a lot from parents is, how do I know if my son is ready for the camp? This is not a YMCA camp. This is not something that, everybody should assume that they can sign up for and be prepared for. If your son is a rising 9th through 12th grader and someone credible in your life, a high school coach, a credible AAU coach, a college coach, has told you your son has the potential to play at the next level, then the camp will be a good fit for them. Young guys, 9th and 10th graders in particular, need to be a little cautious about being physically prepared, because there's going to be a lot of physical play and banging going on. But if you have any questions, we're happy to take a look at highlight films, take a look at game tape, and give you some feedback of, yeah, you're ready, come on, or maybe you ought to wait a year and just wait till you get a little bigger, a little stronger. Happy to do that. We do ask that if we haven't reached out to you, that you have your high school coach give you a letter of recommendation and send that to us, and then we can get you, kind of verified through that process. It's not an invitation-only camp because of NCAA rules, but we do try to be, make sure that the players that are coming are already kind of identified by someone credible as being a potential college player. So that'd be the one thing I'd say for parents, for coaches that are interested in the coaches development program. I think we have a few spots left for 2019. Alumni in that camp and that group come back pretty steadily. So every year there seems to be fewer and fewer spots available, but I know there are a few spots left if guys are interested in that and gals are interested in that. And then parents, we want to help. So if you have questions, curious about something, what's the process look like? Reach out, shoot us an email. We'll get back to you, either myself or Paul Biancardi or other guys that help with the camp. We'll get back with you in a timely manner. And then I think the last thing I would just leave you guys with is that for players and parents alike, and for coaches as well, really thinking about, are you doing something where your game is improving outside of your high school team? It's been our experience that very little coaching is going on outside of the high school programs. And so if you can't answer that, confidently saying, yes, I'm getting great instruction at, with this AAU program or at this other camp that I go to, then I think our camp would be a great fit for you. And we want to, have people who have that mindset. So that's what we're looking for. And I know we'll have another great group this year and hopefully continue to grow the camp.
Absolutely. Parents, players, coaches, if you have an opportunity to reach out to John and learn more about what they're doing there with the Jay Bilas Skills Camp, and if you have an opportunity to attend, I would highly recommend it. John, we can't thank you enough. This has been tremendously informative for us and for our audience. We can't thank you enough for taking an hour or so of your time to jump on with us. We really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Hello, Hoopheads. This is Alan Stein Jr. My new book, Raise Your Game, High Performance Secrets from the Best of the Best, will be available from all major book retailers on January 8th. Raise Your Game takes a rare peek behind the curtain and shows you what the top coaches and players in the game do during the unseen hours. I share their routines, rituals, and habits, as well as proven strategies that you can implement with your team immediately. If you want to maximize your coaching impact and influence, order your copy today at raiseyourgamebook.com.
Head Start Basketball's Player Development Academy offers Cleveland area players a unique opportunity to improve their basketball skills. Regardless of a player's age, skill level, or position, training with Head Start Basketball will elevate your game to the next level. Do you want to improve your ball handling, become a better shooter, or develop into a more skilled, confident player? Our Academy classes offer training that's designed to do just that. Our training sessions are innovative and will have you learning skills that are transferable to actual games. We have 4 different class skill levels for boys and girls, ages 4 and up. All Player Development Academy classes will be held at the Strongsville Recreation Center. For more information or to get registered, please visit www.headstartbasketball.com. Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads podcast, brought to you by Head Start Basketball.